If there were a time machine that could take me back to the weekends of my childhood, I would almost certainly find myself sitting motionless in front of the TV, eyes fixed on the golden sand dunes of The Mummy. Even now, it remains the only film I can watch over and over again to the point of memorising every line of Rick O'Connell's dialogue. Yet behind the surface of a family-friendly action blockbuster lies a series of disturbing behind-the-scenes stories that the cast only dared to reveal years later. Can you believe that the man who nearly ended up fighting the mummy with a gun was Leonardo DiCaprio? From the fact that Anck-Su-Namun was actually almost completely naked beneath the haunting body paint, to the terrifying accident that nearly caused the male lead to suffocate on the gallows, the 15 Dark Secrets Below reveal what the cast of The Mummy, 1999, avoided discussing for decades. 15. The director revealed, Leonardo DiCaprio almost became Rick O'Connell. In many people's memories, Rick O'Connell is an irreplaceable icon tied closely to Brendan Fraser's career. A treasure hunter who is rugged, charmingly clumsy, and full of roguish charisma. But have you ever wondered what film history might look like if the man who faced Imhotep back then had been Titanic's Jack Dawson? In 1997, when Leonardo DiCaprio was the biggest star on the planet, Universal approached him with the script for The Mummy. At the time, Leo truly wanted an action role to escape the enormous shadow of the tragic characters he had been known for. He was ready to trade the ocean for the desert, ready to venture into Hamunaptra to create a new screen persona. But fate had other plans. Leo had already signed on for the beach and was bound by a strict schedule. Intense negotiations took place, but in the end he was forced to turn down the role of Rick O'Connell to honour his contract. The cruel irony was that shortly after he withdrew, the beach ran into production issues and was delayed for quite some time. If Leo had been a little more patient, or if fate had been slightly kinder, he might have appeared in both blockbusters. His withdrawal inadvertently opened the door for Brendan Fraser to rise to stardom. Fraser's Rick O'Connell carried a rougher, more grounded charm, something a polished Leo might not have brought in the same way. One man's missed opportunity became another man's immortal legacy, leaving audiences with a lingering what-if question for more than 2 decades. How would Leo have portrayed this treasure hunter? 14. Patricia Velasquez admitted, the role of Anck-Su-Namun was almost entirely nude. If there is one image that remains both seductive and haunting in the minds of children from the 80s and 90s generation, it is surely the moment when Anck-Su-Namun glides gracefully through the ritual chamber under flickering torchlight. Her skin shimmered with powerful black and gold patterns, radiating a beauty that was both regal and eerily intimidating. But behind that mesmerizing splendor lies a very stark behind-the-scenes truth. Actress Patricia Velasquez was almost completely naked while filming those scenes. To preserve the most authentic look possible for an Egyptian royal consort, the filmmakers made a bold decision. Instead of traditional clothing or fabric costumes, they used body paint. Aside from a small loincloth and minimal jewellery, Patricia's entire body was covered in hand-painted designs. Each filming day became a physical and mental ordeal. The makeup team spent at least 4 hours carefully painting intricate black and gold patterns onto her skin, as delicately as if they were restoring an ancient mural. Patricia had to remain nearly perfectly still throughout the day. She was not allowed to lean back, make sudden movements, or, most importantly, sweat under the intense heat of the studio lights, because even a small smudge could ruin an entire morning's work. Her quiet sacrifice created an iconic image, a beauty sculpted from paint, light, and remarkable endurance, proof that the height of cinematic beauty sometimes comes from harsh experiences the audience never sees. 13. Brendan Fraser recalls 18 terrifying seconds on the edge of life and death Do you remember the classic scene where Rick O'Connell is about to be executed on the gallows in a Cairo prison, his face flushed red, eyes bulging and body thrashing in desperation? At the time, audiences marvelled at how incredibly realistic Brendan Fraser's performance looked. In truth, it was not acting. It was the moment the actor was genuinely facing death. To achieve maximum realism for the action sequence, Fraser agreed to perform the stunt with a real rope around his neck, a decision that nearly turned the film into a real-life tragedy. Things quickly spiraled out of control when the rope was tied too tightly and the weight of his body began pulling downward, completely cutting off the oxygen supply to his brain. What audiences see in the film are actually the genuine survival reflexes of a man suffocating. Fraser later recalled that he saw the world around him begin to blur and darken before he lost consciousness right there on the gallows in front of hundreds of crew members. Ironically, at first, director Stephen Sommers and the crew stood by applauding, believing Fraser was delivering a once-in-a-lifetime performance. It took nearly 20 horrifying seconds of silence before they realised their lead actor had completely blacked out. Fraser was eventually revived amid the panic of the entire set. Later on, he often masked the fear of that day with humour, joking, "They killed me for 18 seconds." 12. The crew confirmed filming in the Sahara was a battle for survival. In our memories, the golden sand dunes of Hamunaptra appear majestic and breathtaking, the backdrop for thrilling horse and camel chases. But behind those picture-perfect shots, the film crew endured what could only be described as a real hell on earth in the Sahara Desert of Morocco. In pursuit of maximum authenticity, director Stephen Sommers essentially threw the entire production team into a survival challenge where the line between filmmaking and real life became dangerously thin. The greatest enemy was not fictional mummies, but the scorching heat that climbed to nearly 50 degrees Celsius. These extreme temperatures did more than cause crew members to faint from dehydration. They also attacked the equipment itself. Cameras became so hot they were impossible to touch, while the precious film stock began to warp, threatening to erase an entire day's work. Yet the heat was not even the most frightening part. Uninvited guests lurked everywhere. Venomous snakes slithered into tents. Scorpions hid inside actors' shoes each morning, turning every step into a gamble with death. The region's unstable security situation at the time even forced the studio to purchase kidnapping insurance for every member of the crew. An oddly unsettling detail for what was supposed to be an entertainment project, yet a harsh reality they had to face. Some nights, a sudden sandstorm could sweep through and bury equipment and carefully built sets within minutes. So when you watch Rick and Evelyn fighting in the middle of a raging sandstorm, remember that the exhaustion and panic on their faces may not have been entirely acting. It may have been the genuine terror of nature trying to swallow them whole. 11. Rachel Weisz recalls how an unknown actress defeated A-list stars. For many viewers, the image of the clumsy yet courageous librarian Evelyn Carnahan has become an irreplaceable icon. Rachel Weisz's charm and intelligence were the perfect counterbalance to Rick O'Connell's rugged personality. But before Rachel joined the project, she was practically an unknown name in the eyes of Hollywood filmmakers. At first, Universal considered some of the biggest stars of the era, including Jennifer Lopez, who had just gained major recognition after Selena, and Ashley Judd, a rising star from several successful thrillers. The biggest obstacle, however, was capturing the character's essence. The studio needed a leading woman who could both trip over bookshelves in a library and still possess the intelligence and determination to confront the undead without fear. Those A-list actresses may have been glamorous, but they lacked the delicate intellectual quality the character required. When Rachel Weisz walked into the audition, she delivered exactly what the role needed: subtle charm, sharp intelligence, and a sincere artistic presence. The decision to gamble on a new face ultimately reshaped the film's history, and turned Rachel into an A-list star almost overnight. Yet Arnold Vosloo reveals the torture of becoming Imhotep. Whenever people talk about Imhotep, the first thing that often comes to mind is the powerful yet chilling face of actor Arnold Vosloo, a classic villain who terrified an entire generation. In 1999, however, bringing that character to life required a physically grueling process. Before visual effects were added in post-production, Arnold Vosloo endured what he himself described as genuine torture to portray the cursed priest. His entire body had to be sealed inside thick layers of latex makeup and prosthetics designed to create the appearance of decaying flesh. This process took hours every morning and left the actor's skin almost completely cut off from fresh air. Under the intense heat of the desert and the powerful studio lights, the makeup effectively became a heat trap. At the end of each filming day, when the latex mask was finally removed, Arnold's skin was often irritated and swollen, while his eyes turned red from chemical exposure and lack of oxygen. There were even moments when, standing in front of the mirror in the makeup room, the actor shuddered because he could barely recognize the humanity in his own reflection. This sacrifice is one of the lesser-known truths behind a memorable villain. Arnold Vosloo did not perform using only his eyes and gestures. He also performed through the genuine physical pain beneath layers of punishing makeup, creating one of the most haunting portrayals of Imhotep ever seen on the big screen. 9. Clive Barker's The Mummy, the dark nightmare that almost became reality. Audiences are used to The Mummy as a humorous adventure in the spirit of Indiana Jones, where comedy blends smoothly with high-energy action. But few people know that the film almost became something far darker, a brutal, disturbing nightmare under the direction of horror master Clive Barker. Clive Barker, the creator behind disturbing works like Hellraiser and Candyman, imagined a completely different version of The Mummy. His story would have taken place in a modern setting, centered around a museum secretly controlled by a cult performing ancient rituals to resurrect a mummy. The tone would have reflected Barker's signature style: extreme violence, grotesque body horror, and eerie sensuality. There would have been no Rick O'Connell cracking jokes, no charming Evelyn, only relentless terror and disturbing imagery. When Universal realized that Barker's vision was far too intense and potentially alienating for mainstream audiences, the studio ultimately decided to walk away and search for a more accessible direction. Although the project returned to square one, it left horror fans with an intriguing question. Just how terrifying might the world of the pharaohs have been if seen through Clive Barker's twisted imagination? A dark, alternate version of the film that perhaps only mature audiences would dare to explore. 8. A push from a pig, when a failure created a blockbuster. Most audiences think The Mummy was always planned as a massive action spectacle with a huge budget. In reality, it nearly ended up buried as a cheap B-movie. At first, Universal planned to spend only about $15 million on the project, barely enough for a small horror film destined to be quickly forgotten. Then a strange twist occurred, and it came not from a rival blockbuster, but from a pig. The turning point was the disastrous box office failure of Babe, Pig in the City. That collapse triggered a major leadership shake-up at Universal. The new executives, eager to prove themselves and deliver a major success that could restore the studio's reputation, took another look at Stephen Sommers' promising script. Almost overnight, the film's budget jumped from $15 million to $80 million. Everything audiences admire on screen, from the massive desert landscapes to the advanced mummy visual effects, was made possible because of that sudden financial boost. In a strange way, the spectacular world of Hamunaptra was opened up by the failure of one unlucky pig. Without that box office flop, The Mummy might have remained a small, forgotten film on an old video shelf. 7. The library scene, the line between comedy and a serious accident. Many viewers still laugh at the moment when Evelyn accidentally knocks over an entire line of bookshelves in the library, like a giant domino chain. It is a perfect piece of physical comedy, offering a light-hearted moment before the darker elements of the curse appear. Behind the camera, however, it was one of the most dangerous scenes Rachel Weisz filmed. There were no computer effects involved. Nearly 2,000 real books sat on large, heavy wooden shelves. To achieve the perfect collapsing chain reaction, the technical crew had to calculate the timing with extreme precision. If Rachel had stepped into the wrong position or reacted a fraction of a second too late, tons of wood and books could have fallen directly onto her, causing serious injuries. Despite the risk, Rachel insisted on performing the scene herself without a stunt double. Her focus and courage paid off. The sequence was completed perfectly on the very first take. When watching the scene again, remember that Evelyn's awkward smile carries another meaning as well. The relief of an actress who had just stepped away from a very real potential disaster. 6. The language of Imhotep, when ancient sounds truly returned. Do you remember the powerful incantations spoken by Imhotep? The strange language that sounded mysterious and spiritually heavy enough to send chills down the spine. At the time, many viewers probably assumed it was simply invented dialogue meant to heighten the drama. In reality, the filmmakers went much further to achieve authenticity. What you hear is not nonsense. It is actual ancient Egyptian. Director Stephen Sommers brought in scholars and linguists to translate the mummy dialogue into reconstructed ancient Egyptian. This placed a heavy responsibility on actor Arnold Vosloo. He did not simply memorize lines. He had to learn how to pronounce sounds and tonal patterns that had not been spoken for thousands of years. Reviving a dead language required intense concentration, since every command or curse needed to carry the authority of a powerful high priest. This meticulous attention to detail created an atmosphere of mystery and reverence throughout the film. When Imhotep speaks, it does not feel like ordinary movie dialogue. It feels like the voice of an ancient civilization rising from beneath the sands. Jerry Goldsmith's music, the melody that opens a doorway through time. The moment the first notes begin, your mind is lifted away from the present and carried to the distant sands of Egypt. Some film scores are not merely background music, they define the entire identity of a film. The music composed by the legendary Jerry Goldsmith is truly the soul of The Mummy. This was Goldsmith at the height of his creative power. Experienced, bold, and full of energy, he created a masterful blend of mysterious Middle Eastern melodies with the sweeping adventure style of classic Hollywood scoring. The result evokes the heroic spirit of Indiana Jones, but with a darker and more mystical tone. What makes it even more remarkable is that Goldsmith composed the score during an extremely demanding period when he was working on 3 other major projects at the same time. Only a few years later, in 2004, Jerry Goldsmith passed away. Looking back, the score for The Mummy feels almost like a brilliant farewell he left for the world, a timeless melody that continues to stir nostalgia whenever audiences return to the memories of their childhood. 4. Alternate opening, the struggle between logic and tribute. In our memories, The Mummy begins with a lavish and tragic flashback about the forbidden love between Imhotep and Ankh-Sunamun. It is a perfect opening that establishes the entire background for a curse lasting thousands of years. However, the film was originally intended to start in a completely different way, one that leaned heavily into nostalgia and directly paid tribute to the original 1932 version. In the initial concept, the Universal logo would appear in the classic black and white style of the 1930s, then gradually dissolve into the blazing desert sun. Even more interesting, the narrator for the opening would have been Imhotep himself, voiced in English by Arnold Vosloo. director Stephen Sommers soon realized a logical inconsistency. Imhotep speaks only ancient Egyptian, and having him narrate in modern English would break the film's sense of mystery and internal consistency. The final decision changed everything. The narration role was given instead to Ardeth Bey, played by Oded Fair. This adjustment not only made the story more coherent, but also created a natural entry point for the audience, allowing the story to unfold through the perspective of a guardian of ancient secrets. A small change, yet one that preserved the mysterious tone audiences still feel every time the film begins. 3. The animated series, the forgotten piece of the Mummy franchise. When the fascination with ancient tombs spread around the world, Universal did not intend for the franchise to remain only on the big screen. The studio aimed to expand it into a broader entertainment universe that could reach even younger audiences. That ambition led to the creation of The Mummy, the animated series, in 2001. Instead of staying only in Egypt, the animated show followed the O'Connell family on adventures around the world as they confronted Imhotep and many new supernatural threats. However, this became a lesser-known corner of the franchise. Because of licensing limitations, the character designs and voices in the animated series were quite different from the film versions, which made some devoted fans feel a bit disconnected. Despite its simple appearance, the show was surprisingly ambitious, with layered storylines that were more complex than the typical children's cartoons of that era. Even if many viewers do not remember the series today, it remains an interesting piece of the franchise, evidence of how powerful the brand had become, expanding from cinema screens to television. 2. When realism came from real danger. Many viewers still shudder when recalling the scene where thousands of scarab beetles swarm across the stone floor and crawl over the characters' bodies as they scream in terror. At the time, most people assumed it was purely computer-generated imagery. The truth was even more intense. Although The Mummy was considered a pioneer in CGI, director Stephen Sommers still favoured traditional practical effects to create the most authentic sense of horror. Many of the scarab shots actually used mechanical models and puppets attached directly to the actors, forcing them to endure the sensation of objects crawling across their skin during filming. It was not just the scarabs. The massive desert explosions in Morocco were real fire and real explosives, detonated only a few meters away from the actors rather than created safely on a green screen. The towering walls of Hamunaptra were constructed from real wood and then collapsed for real, sending dust and debris across the camera lens. This bold and risky approach helped the film maintain its impact even after more than 2 decades. Audiences were not just watching chaos on screen, they were witnessing things that were actually burning, breaking, and collapsing in front of the camera. 1. Box office hit, a brilliant resurrection from the ashes. With an $80 million budget, made possible after the sudden financial boost that changed the project, The Mummy achieved the unexpected by earning more than $415 million worldwide. This was not just a numerical success. It represented a spectacular revival of a franchise that many thought had become outdated since the 1930s. The film's success transformed Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz into A-list stars and opened the door for sequels and spin-offs, including stories about the Scorpion King. More than 25 years later, The Mummy, 1999, still stands as a cinematic landmark and a gold standard for blending action, humour and horror. The hidden hardships, near-fatal accidents and quiet sacrifices made by the cast and crew were ultimately rewarded. The film truly rose from the tomb of the past to become an unforgettable part of childhood memories for millions of viewers. Much like the high priest Imhotep himself, who always finds a way to return, stronger and seemingly immortal. More than 2 decades have passed since the gates of Hamunaptra first opened on the big screen. Many of us are no longer the children who once sat wide-eyed in front of the television. Yet, whenever Jerry Goldsmith's music begins to play, or when we see the roguish smile of Rick O'Connell, we are instantly transported back to one of the brightest memories of our childhood. What is your strongest memory of The Mummy? Share your thoughts in the comments so we can revisit those memories together. If you enjoyed today's journey into nostalgia, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next legendary film stories.